dangerous men lying under oath, mothers collapsing when verdicts were read aloud, people walking into my courtroom believing justice was something they could purchase, bend, or intimidate into submission. I have witnessed all of it across the years I have spent on this bench, but nothing in those decades prepared me for the morning an 82-year-old veteran rolled up his sleeve and made every person in that room forget how to breathe. His name was Harold Bennett. When he entered, nobody looked twice. He moved slowly, one hand on a wooden cane, the other holding a folder so worn its corners had begun to curl. His suit was old but clean. His shoes were polished with the specific discipline that appears only in men who spent their lives honoring rules, uniforms, and country. Across from him sat a woman named Vanessa Cole. She was younger, polished, composed in a way that caught my attention from the moment she settled into her chair. Not nervous, not emotionally affected, not even remotely uncomfortable. She sat there as though this case had already concluded in her favor before it had properly begun. That variety of confidence in my courtroom always causes me to look more carefully. The case appeared straightforward at first. Harold claimed that Vanessa had taken thousands of dollars from him after promising to help repair his home. She claimed he was confused, forgetful, and angry because he had misunderstood their arrangement. That was her strategy. Establish the old man as unreliable, make him appear unstable, introduce doubt about his memory before he opened his mouth. I have encountered that approach many times. When someone cannot destroy the truth, they attempt to destroy the person carrying it. Harold sat without reaction while Vanessa's attorney spoke. He never interrupted, never shook his head, never created a scene. He kept both hands folded over that folder, his thumb moving slowly along its edge, as though he were holding on to something considerably heavier than paper. Then Vanessa looked at him and smiled, not warmly, a small, controlled smile of the variety people produce when they believe they are beyond reach. That was the first moment I felt something shift in the room. I asked Harold to explain what had happened. He rose slowly, and the courtroom went quiet. His voice was rough but controlled. He told me he had served in Vietnam. He told me his wife Eleanor had died 2 years earlier. He told me the roof of the house they had shared for 49 years had developed a leak above their bedroom. Then he said Vanessa had appeared at his door offering assistance. She told me veterans deserved better, Your Honor. When he said those words, Vanessa looked down, only for a single second. But I saw it. Judges are trained to listen to testimony. But after sufficient time on this bench, you learn that bodies confess before mouths do. I leaned forward because this had stopped being simply a story about a bad repair job. This had become a question of why a calm and intelligent woman would target an 82-year-old veteran, and why Harold Bennett had walked into my courtroom holding a folder he seemed almost afraid to open. I asked him one direct question. Mr. Bennett, what evidence do you have? He looked at me, then at Vanessa, and for the first time that morning, his hands began to tremble. He opened the folder with great care, and I remember noticing how deliberate he was with every page. Not because the documents were physically fragile, but because the truth they contained had cost him something to keep. He placed 3 items on the table: a handwritten contract, a bank withdrawal slip, and a photograph of his home. The photograph showed a small white house with a sagging porch, cracked steps, and an American flag hanging beside the front door. It was not a mansion. It held no significant financial value in the way banks calculate these things, but I could see it meant everything to him. Harold looked at that photograph longer than he looked at anyone else in the room. That was Eleanor's house, he said. She planted those roses herself. Vanessa's attorney immediately objected, arguing that emotion had no bearing on the contractual matter before the court. The legal point was technically valid, but I also understood something operating at a different level entirely. In a courtroom, money is rarely only money. Sometimes it is trust. Sometimes it is grief. Sometimes it is the last remaining piece of dignity a person has left to protect. I allowed Harold to continue. He explained that Vanessa had introduced herself as the director of a veteran assistance organization called Home Honor Outreach. She told him her group repaired homes for elderly veterans at reduced rates. She brought printed brochures. She had a functioning website. She wore a badge. Everything carried the appearance of legitimacy. That is precisely how manipulation operates. It does not arrive wearing anything recognizable as a threat. It arrives smiling, organized, professionally prepared, and saying the exact words a lonely person has been needing to hear. Harold said he gave her $8,700, his savings, money he had been holding for medical expenses and winter maintenance. Vanessa's position was that the payment had been a charitable donation, not a construction deposit. In her telling, Harold had willingly supported her organization and then became angry when he discovered that donations were non-refundable. Her voice carried that claim with a steadiness that was almost too deliberate. I watched Harold while she spoke. His jaw tightened, but he remained silent. That told me something important. People lying under pressure tend to overreact when they are challenged. People telling a painful truth often go quiet because what they are carrying is already too heavy to add anything to. Then Vanessa's attorney stood and began examining Harold on his age. Had he ever forgotten appointments? Did he take medication? Had he confused dates before? Had members of his family ever raised concerns about his memory? Each question arrived wrapped in courtesy, but I understood exactly what was being constructed. He was not investigating facts. He was attempting to reduce Harold from a credible witness to a fragile elderly man whose account no one could trust. Harold answered every question with quiet steadiness. Then the attorney asked whether it was possible that Harold had simply misunderstood what Ms. Cole had communicated to him. The courtroom went still. Harold looked down at his hands. That was when I noticed something. The sleeves of his shirt were buttoned tight and pulled low, almost deliberately positioned to keep his wrists covered. Initially, I thought nothing of it. Many older men dress formally when they appear in court. But Harold kept touching his cuffs each time Vanessa spoke, as though something beneath the fabric was making itself felt through the cloth. I asked whether there was any further evidence he wanted to present. He hesitated. Then he said quietly, "There is one more thing, Your Honor." Vanessa's smile disappeared in an instant. I have come to understand that fear does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it sits in a courtroom in an old suit, holding a worn folder, and asks for permission to tell the truth. Harold looked at me as though he wanted very much to speak, but something inside him was still fighting against it. His eyes moved toward Vanessa, then toward the people seated in the gallery behind her. A group from her organization had accompanied her that day. They sat together in the second row, dressed professionally, speaking in quiet murmurs, as though they were attending a business function rather than a hearing. That bothered me. Harold was alone. No family beside him, no attorney, no one whose presence communicated that someone in his life had his back. Just one elderly veteran standing before this court, trying to establish that he had not been deceived by a woman half his age. I asked him again, "Mr. Bennett, what is the additional evidence?" He swallowed. "May I show the court something?" Vanessa's attorney stood immediately. "Your Honor, we object unless this material has been properly disclosed." I looked at him and said, "Sit down." I decide what